Let's get you ready for the Rose Bowl and answer this question. Does either team have an advantage over the other?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time for another edition of a Locked On College crossover of Locked On Ducks. I'm Spencer McLaughlin. That's Jay Stevens of Locked On Buckeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with either of these two particular teams who square off in the Rose Bowl. Jay, I'm struggling to find a huge advantage one way or the other. Vegas agrees. The point spread's under a field goal, which means that, they think Ohio State is just slightly better, but not quite as much better as they thought going into the October 12th matchup, which was, of course, at Autzen Stadium. And Ohio State was favored by, I think it was 3.5 in that sort of range. Now you go neutral site. The line is smaller. It is fluctuate all over the place. But Vegas's feeling is what my feeling is on this game. I don't look at either side of the ball or any particular position group. You can find small advantages here, but even the bye factor, Jay. Oregon hasn't played since December 7th. Rest versus rust. Ohio State will be on 11 days rest coming into this game. I don't see there being a glaring matchup either way where you go, oh, this is just huge advantage for Team X or Team Y.
No, I think you're correct. I don't think when you look at either of these teams, and think about position group versus position group, or even coach versus coach, where there's a massive advantage one way or another, which is why the line is the way that it is, which is why this is billed as potentially the national championship in college football, but it's in the quarterfinal round. We've heard all the cliche things. You've heard people talk about it. But no, there is no huge advantage either way, which is why this is a massive chess match. 4 quarters, Jim Knowles has done his thing. Dan Lanning has his team prepared. They've had a longer rest than Ohio State has. How does that affect the Ducks early in the game? Ohio State just played a game. So how does that impact their play early in the game? There's so many different things that we're questioning and wondering, how does this or that impact it? But we also don't really see a huge advantage because, Spencer, I don't believe there is one on either side of either side in this game.
Yeah, and when you look at the coaching staffs, I thought it was a really fun chess match the first time around, perhaps more so because Oregon won the game,
right?
Of course. But I thought that both coaching staffs were doing a really good job across the board of leaning into their strengths, going with what works, making adjustments. It felt back and forth. Ohio State ran all over the field in the first half of the game. Oregon made some adjustments, took away the ground game in the second half, and Oregon has been under Will Stein the last couple of years a team that uses the middle of the field a lot, has a lot of short, quick hitters. They hit a couple of those, but then they started taking downfield shots when Ohio State tried to adjust. Those are the sorts of things that I get the sense are going to define this game, and I think we saw in the first matchup that there is no clear, distinct advantage for Ryan Day and Chip Kelly just because they are the more veteran tandem. Jim Knowles as well has been around college football for a long time, while Tosh Lupoi is easily, of Oregon's 3 most important coaches, is the most veteran guy. And I think you'd probably look and say he's third of those 3. He's been incredibly good this year. This is not knocking on Tosh Lupoi, but Dan Lanning has been great in a lot of ways this season. Will Stein has been really, really good and was great against Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. But the caliber of players, the caliber rosters that you have on both sides of the ball, top to bottom, Jay, to me make this all about coaching. Is whichever staff has the better game plan and makes the better adjustments and is better situationally, I think that's how this game gets decided.
And I'm right there with you. It is how the game's going to get decided. And Spencer, there's one thing about the Oregon and Ohio State rematch this year that we didn't get in 2021. 2021, Oregon came into the shoe, beat Ohio State. Ohio State made drastic changes on defense after that game, even maneuvering a guy that was a position coach and then being the unofficial defensive coordinator who ended up getting a coordinator job at the end of the year. After the loss this year to Oregon on October 12th, Jim Knowles, Ryan Day spent the time during the bye week re-engineering the defense. We saw there's been different looks on defense. Jordan Hancock playing a little bit more deep safety. Sometimes Caleb Downs playing what looks like the Mike in a triangle look for the linebackers. So there's been different looks, and I'm really curious to see how those changes that he's made this year impact the game. I do think that Ohio State can do some things to maybe occasionally slow down Oregon's offense, but defensively, can they do enough for 4 quarters? I don't know. Because I don't know if the Buckeyes can get a pass rush 2 games in a row like they did against Tennessee with just the front 4 mainly, because you haven't really done that. I don't know if you want to blitz this game. I don't know if you want to keep everybody out in the back. I think you want to mix it up, but that may be something that plays into Dillon Gabriel's hands, because Dillon Gabriel might be able to figure out a way to maneuver and to get away from Ohio State's different looks defensively to trying to bring pressure on him.
Well, it was one of the biggest factors that led to Oregon winning in the first matchup. Dillon Gabriel wasn't sacked. Now, that's not to say he was never pressured, but to have 0 sacks with that front 4, that's something that Buckeye fans, I'd imagine, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, looked at and said, man, what in the world are we doing? JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Tyleik Williams, no sacks? None? Barely even a hit, a scratch on Dillon Gabriel here. And since then, Oregon's offensive line does look a little bit different. They're deeper in that they have, had some injuries. Marcus Harper got dinged up, and that required some other guys to play. But an interesting note about Oregon's offensive line in this game, Jay, you're going to see 4 different guards in all likelihood from Oregon play. I have no idea how they manage the rotations, but if you watch Oregon the last several weeks, you have seen Nishad Strother, you've seen Marcus Harper, you've seen Kavika Rogers, you've seen Davey Uli. And the starting 2 guys, I'm pretty sure, gosh, it's been so long since Oregon's played a game. I got to rack my brain here to think about it, but Strother and Iuli, I think, have been kind of the highest level tandem, but Harper and Rogers have gone out there as well. I think Rogers is the 4th of those guys, but I'm fascinated to see how they rotate them, how they can, again, match up against Ohio State front 4 that I know is talented, but I just haven't seen the game this year in a big spot where I feel like they've dominated. I think Jim Knowles saw that as well from the first Oregon game. And as you mentioned, they started blitzing a lot more and bringing. So how does Oregon counter to that? Those are the sorts of chess match things that I think are just going to end up defining this game more than, Oregon doesn't have enough talent in the secondary. Oregon doesn't have this. Or Ohio State doesn't have that. I don't think you can look anywhere and say there's a huge glaring weakness to the point where it's, so exploitable for the other team that's just all you're going to be thinking, we're only as strong as our as our weakest link. I don't see that here.
There's 2 things that pop into my head. This is the second time Ohio State's played second game in a row, where they're playing an offensive line that rotates on the offensive line, because Tennessee played multiple right tackles. Oregon's playing 4 guards, which that's so silly, but Ohio State's doing some silly things because they're going to play 3 guards.
It sounds silly, but it's been working. That's the thing. Look at what Penn State's got a great defense, and Oregon went up and down the field. They scored 3 touchdowns on their first 3 possessions.
And Ohio State's going to use 3 guards. They're going to use Luke Montgomery, who's been a backup all year, played backup against Tennessee and played way better than I thought he was going to. Your starting left guard is going to be Austin Sareveld. Starting right guard is going to be Tegra Shabola. They'll move Sareveld to right guard to bring in Montgomery at left guard. Shabola goes to the bench to kind of keep him more fresher. I think the more snaps he plays, the worse he gets on the field. And I think they've kind of realized that. It's just they found it out a little bit too late in the year. It's weird, man. We're talking about 2 teams that are 2 of the best teams in the country that are playing more. They aren't just playing 2 guards. We never think about this, Spencer. Uh-huh. You and I have been watching football our entire lives and talking football on a regular basis, and it blows our minds that 2 teams that are this good right now are playing 3 for Ohio State, 4 guards for Oregon. It's just weird that it's working, and this is not something you see every single day.
No, it's not. I think you have to credit both coaching staffs because that requires a lot. You've got to understand what the strengths and weaknesses of those players are, why you're putting this guy into the game, or do you feel like there's no drop-off at all? Or, if this guy is better in pass protection, are we going to rotate him in here? Do we feel okay about the matchup, or how is he performing? Like, it requires a lot of attention to detail, but I think both coaching staffs have shown they're really capable of that. The Michigan game, aside for Ohio State, I think that was a pretty resounding statement.
You could have kept that Michigan thing away from the show, man. You could have kept that thing.
I could have, but that wouldn't have been as much fun for me personally. So that's where we're at right now. Where we're going to be next is talking about more matchups. There's a lot of evenly matched groups on both sides in this game. But what are the biggest ones that define who goes to the semifinal? You're going to have to stick around to find out. First reminder, this episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did you know that Rocket Money can help you find subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? You feel pretty foolish if you found that out, wouldn't you? Well, Rocket Money is here to help. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place. Like Oregon and Ohio State fans will be in the Rose Bowl come Wednesday afternoon, evening, however you refer to that particular time of day and into the night. They'll all be in the same place. Rocket Money keeps it consolidated as well. Whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions. That's like the total amount of money college football is paying coaches to not coach. Jimbo Fisher comes to mind, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Would you like to have some amount of money like that at the end of the year? I bet you would, because after this game, the losing fan base is probably going to want to consume a beer or 70. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. There are going to be a lot of big matchups in the Rose Bowl. I want to start with maybe the highest level individual unit in the game, Jay. That's Ohio State's wide receiving core. I think second place, you'd probably have Oregon's offensive or defensive line. The offensive line, of course, a finalist for the Joe Moore Award. The defensive line has been really good, but that trio of wide receivers, it's got my attention. I talked yesterday on Locked On Ducks about how my top concern for Oregon, not just defensively, but overall in the game, is how the safeties defend in coverage. They haven't been super rangy guys on the back end. They haven't been phenomenal covering in man-to-man situations down the field. If I'm Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, I look at that on film and say, we have to find a way to get Kobe Savage or Tysheem Johnson covering any one of the three receivers, Carnell Tatum, Eka Ibuka, or Jeremiah Smith. And I felt like in the first matchup, they weren't able to accomplish that a whole lot. It felt like every time those receivers were making a play, and now it doesn't always matter who's covering those guys, of course, but felt like when they were making plays, it was on one of Oregon's top three cover guys. What do you think Chip Kelly's going to dial up with that chess match?
A lot of movement pre-snap to try to help Will Howard decipher what's going to happen post-snap. But great defenses will do some things where pre-snap, you won't be able to see the look you're going to get post-snap. So I do think Will Howard's going to have to utilize some motion behind him to figure out what the defense is going to do, but also realize that look you're going to get as soon as the ball is snapped, it might be different than the look before the snap of the ball. I say all that to say, because I think Chip Kelly is going to have some things that's going to work for him, but you got to be able to run the ball. And I know one thing in this game when it comes to an offensive line at Ohio State is using three offensive guards, and one guard's going to be playing both left and right side. That could impact how well you run the ball. One of the easiest ways to help the guys on the outside get the ball is to run it. But that's one caution I have. One of my concerns is I don't know how well Ohio State will be able to run the ball. Because I think if they run the ball well, Jeremiah Smith does whatever he wants to do. Carnell Tatum, Eka Ibuka, they do whatever they want to do. But if the Buckeyes can't run the ball, that drastically negatively impacts how the guys on the outside are going to be able to get the ball. Because in games like this, you have to be able to run the ball and play good defense. It's just kind of elementary. And I know the focus is Jeremiah Smith, and I believe Ohio State has to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith no matter what. But if you're just throwing the ball to him and not running the ball, I think Oregon's defense is smart enough and those coaches are good enough to make the necessary adjustments to try to slow that thing down. I don't know if Ohio State's going to be able to run the ball well enough to keep the ball going in the air to Jeremiah Smith, where it's an easy game of pitch and catch between Will Howard and number 4.
We'll see how flag happy the officiating crew is with regards to Jeremiah Smith.
Do we know what conference is officiating this game?
I actually have not heard. I usually don't find that out until the television crew tells us. I would imagine it'll be ACC, Big 12, or SEC. That's standard operating procedure. Right. You don't typically have a G5 conference out there. You usually have one of the Big 4 that's not a fit. But of course, this is a classic Big Ten matchup, if you will. So I mean, maybe they send a Big Ten crew out there. I don't know. That would seem.
Any Pac-12 officiating crew still active that they could call this game?
Yeah. Oh man, you just brought up a house of horrors for Oregon fans. But the idea of putting a Pac-12 crew on this game.
Yeah,
Oh boy.
yeah.
Oh boy. Oh no. As Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec would say, that is an oh no. A big oh no. The next matchup that pops in my head, Jay, that defines this game is the one that surprised me the most when Ohio State throttled Tennessee. The offensive line against the front four. Against Tennessee, they were really good. In the first matchup, I'm curious your assessment. I'd say Ohio State's offensive line played well, but I certainly felt like Oregon's defensive front accomplished a lot more than Ohio State's defensive front did in that game. But you lose Seth McLaughlin, which for Oregon fans is the equivalent of losing Jackson Powers Johnson from last year's team. He won the Remington Award this year for the nation's top center. You lose him, and then to have that performance against a Tennessee front four that I know there are plenty of people say, well, Tennessee wasn't that good. Tennessee's offense was never that great. Their defense, however, has been great all year, and Ohio State torched them because they kept Will Howard upright. That, to me, is one of the reasons that my confidence in Oregon's ability to win this game came down at least a hair, because I watched Ohio State's reshuffled offensive line play against James Pearson Company and go,
Yeah.
oh boy.
Yeah.
Now, Jordan Birch is going to play in this game. He didn't play in the first matchup, but that offensive line played really well against the Vols.
They did play very, very well. This is actually one of those matchups where, with as well as Ohio State's offensive line played against Tennessee, I think they can have some success against Oregon's defensive line. The issue for me comes in with the tackles on Ohio State. How well do they hold up with just simply one guy, Jordan Birch? Didn't play in the first game. I know there's other guys on the D line for Oregon that you have to account for, but what does Jordan Birch do? If he is neutralized, Ohio State might be able to have some success. If he is a massive factor, or just a factor at all, that's a problem. Because Josh Fryer and Donovan Jackson, they have both showed they can hold up against some of the best in the country. But also, we all remember what Abdul Carter did against Donovan Jackson, I believe, twice in that game. It happens. It's also Donovan Jackson's first time playing left tackle. He's going to get beat. Josh Fryer's played a whole lot better at right tackle. However, he does struggle at times if he gets beat at the line of scrimmage. Sometimes he can't recover, and he's not quick enough. He's not strong enough to recover at the rate you want him to. Next thing you know, the guy that's coming at him is now in the backfield in the quarterback's face. I want to know what Jordan Birch does. What is their plan to neutralize him? I know what Mateo did the last game. I know what Harmon did the last game. They did a whole lot of massive things for Oregon's defense. I'm looking at the guy, Jordan Birch. What does he do? I think he'll be a problem, just being honest with you. And I think some of my answers already, Spencer, have kind of showed you like where my thoughts are with this game. I think he'll be a problem because it's not like you can just focus on one guy or focus on two guys. Oregon has guys at every level that you have to worry about. And that could be bad news for an offensive line at Ohio State that's been able to build some chemistry, but hasn't faced anything like this together.
Yeah, one of the reasons that going into the first matchup, I was curious to see how Oregon's defense would fare was, wow, no Jordan Birch, and Oregon made it 2 for 2 on losing a premier edge rusher against Ohio State and finding a way to win the game. So what sort of impact can he have? There have been games where Jordan Birch doesn't really make his presence felt, and then there are games where he thwarts drives on his own or creates a touchdown like he did against Maryland, coming off the edge and stripping Billy Edwards Jr. and Brandon Johnson took it to the house. Like, there's a lot of ebb and flow there, but certainly I'd obviously rather have him than not, and not say, well, they beat him the first time without him. Like, you just rather have that sort of guy. You want to have playmakers available out there, but I want to talk about special teams in this game.
Why? No! I hate special teams.
That's my point.
Who do we turn the kickoff? What are we doing here? I don't care if it's... No! Spencer! My wife and my son are gone right now, so I can get as all as I want to. What are we doing? We just end the show right now? Actually, I can't click anything.
No, you can't. I'm running the show here. So that's why I wanted to bring it up, because Oregon misses a PAT, high snap, Holder can't get it down. Ohio State almost returns that for 2 points. by the way. Kenyon Sadiq doesn't track him down, and suddenly Oregon has to go for it on 4th and goal at the end of the game because they would have been down by they would have been down by 4 points at the end. And then they try to go for 2 to get it back, and they don't get there. And that changes the dynamic of that final drive completely. And one of those things that when you've got 2 high-level rosters, evenly matched teams, yeah, your star players got to play well, execute in big spots, third down, all that sort of stuff. Special teams is in there for me, Jay. And I don't think there's necessarily a massive advantage to be gained unless a kick or punt returner is able to break one loose. But I think for both teams in this game, when you have a team as good as the other that you're going up against, you have to avoid the big mistake on special teams that gives them a momentum shifter.
You're exactly right. Avoiding that big mistake is going to be huge. I reacted in the way that I did when Spencer brought up special teams is because Ohio State had a kicking competition the week they were playing Tennessee. And they were going to decide that thing. I think it was the Wednesday practice. They were going to decide who was going to kick on Saturday night. That's not a good look at all for Ryan Day, for the other coaches there, that you're Ohio State and you can't figure out the kicking game. Your punter's not doing the good either. So we're talking about a team that's almost elite at every other position. I mean, has elite guys almost everywhere, but can't figure out kicking. If the game comes down to kicking, either a punt to flip the field or a kick that's 35 or further, makes me nervous. And I'm going to lie to you, because Ohio State is in a situation right now where they can't figure out that part of special teams. Also, in the return game, Brandon Ennis should return kickoffs and punts. That's an easy thing. He's not a top the receiver in the room, so you're not worried about, well, an injury, he may get hurt. No, you don't even use him as much as you need to. Let Brandon Ennis return punts and kickoffs. They tried Trevian Henderson back there returning kickoffs. Caleb Downs, they returned a punt return, which I think would be great if they kept it back there, but they try to keep rotating guys. They can't settle on any one guy to return a kickoff or a punt. They can't get the kicking game right. And if it comes down to that, it's not a good look for Ohio State. If it's a kicking thing, I trust returners if they put the right guy out there. That's an if, because sometimes these coaches don't put the right guy out there.
There's one more question I have before we get to our score predictions for the game, and it's about Ohio State offensively and what Penn State did and whether Ohio State will employ such tactics. That is coming up next. All right, Jay, before we get to our score predictions here to wrap up today's show, Penn State had a lot of success running the ball against Oregon, and they did that with the use of motion and shifts. Now, their offensive line also played well. You can have all the clever, creative plays and concepts that you want. If your offensive line doesn't win to the point of attack, nothing else matters. But Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, really good backs. Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, really good backs for Ohio State here. What Penn State was able to do that I'm curious to see if Chip Kelly, is able to put in some new concepts, plays, formations, whatever, and certainly you see offensive coordinators do that all the time for big matchups like this, is how does he use motion? How does he use shifts? Because when I've watched Ohio State this year, I feel like their run game hasn't been, static, but it's not overly complex. And I wonder if they don't try to get a little bit more creative with the way that Oregon just struggled with eye discipline and gap discipline and tackling in the open field on the perimeter against Penn State.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen. And I believe that because Chip Kelly did some things against Tennessee that we really hadn't seen much at all. I mean, the fact that they scored, 40-plus points against Tennessee was like not even in the realm of my thought, because Ohio State had just been really methodical throughout the year, kind of slow, huddling a whole lot more than you ever saw during Ryan Day's tenure here in Columbus. And so I'm thinking, I think Chip Kelly has saved some stuff for later in the year, and Ryan Day realizes you got to go more up-tempo, you got to do some different looks, you got to change things up, because you have to do whatever it takes. Ryan Day made a comment, it's 3 words, leave no doubt. In regards to the mindset right now when you're out on the field, leave no doubt that you're better than them. Not by by your play and by the score at the end of the game. And I think Chip Kelly, especially after that Michigan loss, I brought it up, I think he had to kind of look in the mirror and say, what did I do? What was the problem? How do we fix it? And I think Chip Kelly's going to realize what Penn State did, how Ohio State could implement some of the things that Nittany Lions did, the things that worked for Ohio State, and then also use them against Oregon. But you got Quinshon Judkins, you got Travion Henderson. And I think in this game, Henderson might have a game we Buckeye fans will remember because he is just ready to just burst. He has not had a single game of rushing over 100 yards this year. And that kind of makes me kind of think this is that game.
That's on the one hand surprising and not because of Judkins' presence there. That's a true split backfield.
Yeah.
That's still surprising that there hasn't been a single one. Not even against like Akron?
No. The most he had in a game was 87 against Oregon. And the second half was really the dud. He would have gone over 100 that game. But they couldn't run the ball in the second half. It's weird, man. It's very weird to think about that. But I think Chip Kelly's going to do some different things in the run game that will trip Oregon up. That I do believe.
All right, let's make our predictions here and try to come up with reasons as to why we're.
You don't seem really enthusiastic about this part of the show.
I'm just nervous. That's all it is. It is like everything. I've gotten some messages from Oregon fans like, man, you don't seem that confident going in this game. No, I have every bit of confidence in the world that Oregon can win the game. I know that is something they're capable of doing. Heck, I could see Oregon win. I don't think anybody could win by more than 14 points. I think that's the absolute upper limit.
That's high.
Yeah. Well, then no, that's what I'm saying. That's the ceiling.
Yeah.
That's the ceiling for either team. I think it's decided by less than 10 points. I've got Oregon winning 30-27, if for no reason other than I need an emotional pick-me-up on Wednesday after getting the news earlier as we're recording this show that I'm going to have to get a different car because the same one that I've had for 11 years, I have had this car, Jay, and it has finally reached its last legs because it's going to cost an arm and a leg and everything I've got to repair it and such. So if for no other reason, then I could use a little bit of, hey, that makes you feel good. I've got Oregon winning. I think this is a close competitive game, but oddly enough, I feel pretty good. I hope I don't have to eat my words here. I feel pretty darn good about Atticus Sappington and the Oregon field goal and kicking game. So I'll take Oregon 30, Ohio State 27, and I think this is another instant classic that will be more enjoyable for people who are not fans of either of these teams. It is going to be way more fun if you're some diehard college football fan in Auburn, Alabama going, oh, nice, Oregon's playing Ohio State. This is good. Let me sit back, crack open a beer. This is going to be awesome. For Oregon, Ohio State fans, I think this is going to be a 3-hour sweat-a-thon.
Spencer, I'm going to do something I didn't do the first time around. Oregon 31, Ohio State 28.
Oh!
It's kind of a thing with this team where I think the offensive line will play better than I think they're going to. I will honestly, I'm not negative, down on the offensive line. I think rotating 3 guys is going to be a problem in this game. I think Jeremiah Smith may get his. I even think Travion Henderson will go over 100 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. I think the issue is going to be Oregon's going to do what? Take the pillow away. I think Oregon's going to do what is needed to slow down everybody else. I don't think there's an answer for Jeremiah Smith, and I think Oregon's tackling issues in the open field will allow Travion Henderson to score a couple times. That's it. I don't have faith in the kicking game. He's made numerous kicks this year, guys. Don't get me wrong, but I think in the biggest games, he's not. He missed one against Nebraska. He missed 2. I think it was 2 against Michigan. I think he's going to miss 1 against Oregon in the Rose Bowl. And I do think that Oregon and Dylan Gabriel are going to do enough. They're good enough to beat Ohio State twice in a year. It's weird. One of the toughest things, it's cliche, I'm going to say it. I don't care. People are like, well, everybody says it. I'm going to be one of those guys. It's very tough to beat one team twice in a year. You don't see that much in the NFL, and they play division teams twice in a season. And I think Oregon's one of those teams that's playing in a way that every time they play somebody this year, they have an answer. It doesn't matter if it's Penn State in the Big Ten Championship, Ohio State at night in Austin Stadium. It doesn't matter who it is. Oregon has had an answer for everybody. And I think this is one of those games where Oregon has a better quarterback. Ohio State has better skill players. I think Oregon is just going to find ways to do what is needed, do just enough to win the game.
I am nervously optimistic at Jay's apparent slight lack of confidence in the Buckeyes. I respect you for picking against Ohio State, though. It's not a popular thing to do amongst the internet fan base that we talk to every day, but sometimes we do things not because it is easy, but because it is hard. Jay Stevens, Locked On Buckeyes. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. This has been a Locked On College crossover. Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.